Going to call the Fiscal Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, May 1st. First up, I need approval of the minutes for Monday, April 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Karski, seconded by Aguilar. Any comments, corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have two items under reports and updates. We're going to start with item A, discussion on the pension design study. We'll start with Bill O'Toole. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Bill O'Toole, Human Resources. I appreciate the Council's consideration for this ongoing project for the City of Sioux Falls. And just to refresh the memory of perhaps the folks that may be watching at home and in the audience, that one of the goals that the pension boards were given was to reduce and stabilize the city's annual pension contribution rates. And they've gone through a year-long comprehensive review of the pension plan, and that was done mostly during 2011. And as this body knows, they also hired an actuarial consulting firm called Cavanaugh McDonald to assist them with that review. And in February of this year, Cavanaugh McDonald presented their report to the board, and the board in turn in March of this year presented the mayor and the council with their recommendations. And the way they presented their recommendations is they made the recommendations that affected future employees and current employees. And the focus today is on the recommendations associated with those future employees, and there are really two considerations on the table, if you will, as it relates to those future employees. One of the options is consideration going to the South Dakota retirement system, or the other option is to create a new tier structure with new benefit levels within the existing defined benefit pension plan at the City of Sioux Falls. Both options, I'm happy to report, have merit and significant savings tied to those. The focus that we wanted to share additional information today was on the South Dakota retirement system, and I'm happy to introduce Rob Wiley, the Executive Director of the South Dakota retirement system, to come up and give you kind of that big picture look about the South Dakota retirement system and some of the mechanics that would be involved, and also answer any questions, as well as administrative staff will be available to answer questions as well. But otherwise, I'm going to introduce and bring up Rob Wiley from the South Dakota retirement system.
Welcome, Mr. Wiley. Thank you for coming today.
It's my pleasure to be here. I hope I can help you in some way or other, and I know you have a big job in front of you on this area. I am Rob Wiley, Executive Director of the South Dakota Retirement System. I've been with the system for about 30 years, and so seen lots of the good times and some of those that aren't so good. And so let me just give you a quick background. My one-pager is up above, and I believe that maybe each of you also have that. I'll just make a couple points on the front of it, of this sheet, and then most of the items relating to the plan design and features are on the back side. But for all practical purposes, the South Dakota Retirement System manages the retirement plan for virtually all public employees in the state of South Dakota, with one major exception, and that's the plan in here that predates the retirement system and exists since before SDRS was consolidated in 1974. It's really designed to be an efficient and effective plan that shares the cost equally between members and their employers, and is designed really to focus on career employment in public sector. Our mission is to plan and implement and administer income replacement programs, and also encourage additional savings for retirement so that all SDRS members and their families have the resources and the opportunity to achieve financial security at retirement, death, or disability. The recent addition to that mission is the addition of the encouragement and effort towards promoting additional savings, personal savings, along with the retirement plan. Our goal is to try and replace approximately 55% of your income prior to retirement with your retirement benefits. Our current formulas do not reach that far. It is a goal for us, but we are not to those levels at this point. We also have a recommended replacement for our members of SDRS, Social Security, and personal savings of approximately 85% to really maintain their standard of living going forward. SDRS, like the Sioux Falls pension plans, has been a well-funded plan for a long time. We've been 100% funded in 22 of the last 25 years. Just like everyone, we took hits during the rough times in 2008 and 2009. We've made some successes in bringing the plan back, and we've returned to slightly over 100% funded as of June 30th of 2011. We have almost 75,000 members in SDRS. 38,000 of those are active contributing members, about 14,000 who are inactive but waiting to receive benefits, and slightly over 20,000 that are retired and receiving benefits. Our benefit payroll as of June 30th of 2011 was just short of $360 million a year. That is my broad comments about SDRS. If you have any questions, I could handle those, but otherwise I'll jump into what are more the features of the plan.
Any questions? I think you can continue.
Thank you. Really, there is one point, Mr. Chair, that I'd like to make before I go on, and that is I'm not here to promote SDRS in the sense I'm not here asking you to consider membership in this plan. The decisions you have are very different from that, and I'm not here to try and promote the decisions, but just give you information. The fact is, and Bill will tell you this later also, that if there is an interest in the park and coming in to join with us in this plan, it will take legislation to provide for certain features that are not provided for in our law right now, particularly the idea of some people in, as of new hires in, and those that are former employees, current employees not being in, is while I do not see it as a significant point, it is not currently provided for in South Dakota retirement system law. The benefit structure of SDRS is very similar to your own benefit structure. It's primarily a hybrid plan that offers retirement benefits based on a multiplier, the salary, and the years of service that the member has. Our general employees are Class A, have a 1.55 final average of compensation formula that compares, and Bill may have already gone over with you, I think the number that compares for you is 1.8. We do offer a plan inside of FCRS for our public safety employees, that's both fire and police, and certain other employees in non-municipal type positions. And that formula is currently, for an ongoing basis, 2.0% of compensation going forward. The benefit structure that we offer for our retirement benefits is a joint and survivor benefit. This may be a little bit different than what many plans use. Many plans will start from a straight life benefit and then work their way down with reductions into the joint and survivor payments. Because of the high level of number of people who have spouses in South Dakota, the original design, it goes even back before my time, was that we would offer as our starting point a joint and survivor benefit instead of a straight life. That adds some additional cost to us, but it is something that can be worked out as far as quantitatively to give you an idea. The short answer is our actual multipliers are slightly lower than where you are at right now in your program. We do a guaranteed contribution payout. All dollars contributed by the member and most of the dollars contributed by the employer are paid out in the event that someone terminates their employment. We defer vested benefits in that we improve vested benefits from the time that you terminate to the date that you retire. It's a little bit of an unusual feature, but it is designed to help those that don't necessarily work a full career to keep the time value of their benefit whole. We have an automatic COLA that varies depending on the plan funding and the CPI between 2.1 and 3.0. Family survivor benefits and disability benefits, plus we offer a couple of voluntary plans. From the perspective of how it works, for the most part, the employer does a deduction from each payroll primarily developed off of the W-2 income. That's deducted, and there are more complete definitions here than I could give you on this sheet of paper, but it's primarily W-2 income. Has the payroll deductions made from it. It does not include in compensation travel, meals, lodging, etc., and termination pay at the end of a member's career. The matching rates for contributions for the general employees are 6% from the employer and 6% from the employee. For the Class B individuals, it's 8% of compensation for the employee and the employer. We have our employers actually report to us each month by the 15th of the following month, and the contribution transmission is required at that same time. We offer in-house training for what would be in-house staff on your part, typically payroll agents or people in the HR department that work with us, and we provide that training for those individuals. I've walked through this pretty rapidly, but I am kind of to the end of my script, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Wiley? Councilor Jameson.
How do you think this would be received on the state legislature level about including the city of Sioux Falls? Do you think that'd be a problem?
We've, over the years, brought in different groups. There's 470 different employers in SDRS right now. For the most part, the laws established at the time of the plans being coming into existence in '74 are still the provisions that say these are what you have to do to join the plan. Anyone who is a public employer can join the plan, and as recently as within the last 5 years, the example would be the classified employees for the city of Sioux Falls. For the teachers, the public schools of Sioux Falls, the clerk, some of the janitors, cooks, some of the variety of non-professionals all joined SDRS, and it was really pretty straightforward, and it just happened all as prescribed by law.
I think Councilor Aguilar had a question?
I got it.
Okay. Councilor Karski?
Yes, Mr. Wiley, thank you for making the trip to Sioux Falls from Pierre today. We appreciate it. And I talked to Mr. Wiley here a couple of weeks ago. I think I may have been probably the first person to call you from the council. And we had an interesting conversation between you, your legal counsel, and somebody else.
Damian Prunty, Director of Operations.
Yes, okay. And a couple of things that came out of that conversation that really weren't talked about today. The one that sticks in my mind the biggest, I guess, is this is an opt-in only. There's no opting out.
That's correct.
Okay, so if we pull the trigger on this, we're committed.
It's been approached that way, and it's a fairly straightforward answer to that. And from the perspective of the plan, it's becomes a situation that opting in, opting out, when things are good, I'm going to go this way. When things are bad, I'm going to go this way. To have the plan with a design that will last forever, opting in and opting out is a very difficult thing to maintain a consistent budgetary, a consistent contribution rate, a very long-term perspective, not only for the plan, but for those that work in the plan, or who participate in the plan.
And I understand and I appreciate that, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was fully aware of that, I guess. And the other thing, too, is just so that everybody is clear on it, SDRS did not contact the city of Sioux Falls. We contacted you, as you had stated, just so, again, that everybody is fully aware of which direction this contact was initiated. So we, again, thank you for being here. A couple of things come to mind, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer or Mr. O'Toole can answer. The benefit formula. Do we have an idea of how the SDRS one compares to our current retirement plan?
Bill's right here, yes.
As you can see from Rob's presentation, 1.55% is the multiplier in the formula for the SDRS. For the general class and for public safety, it's 2% for all years of service. The formula under the new tier structure and the existing are the same. The new tier structure is 1.8% for the general class, and for public safety, it's 2.5% for the first 25 years and 1.5% for any years of service after 25 years. So in relation to theirs, it's 2.0 for their public safety. For us, it's 2.5 and 1.5, and for the general class, 1.55 versus 1.8.
2.5. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. A little bit more information, if you don't mind, on the employee voluntary election, how much they can contribute and how that, is that a commingled thing? And I guess this would probably be for Mr. Wiley. Is that commingled with those retirement plan funds then?
You're looking at the item that's shown up there. Let's see here. The second bullet down, supplemental savings plans.
Correct.
And that is actually a 457 plan, governmental deferred compensation. The payroll maximums are the same maximums as a 401k or a 403b. The number currently stands at 16.5, if I'm not mistaken, and then you have catch-ups at different ages and even a retirement catch-up. So that number is variable over time. Ultimately, it rises as cost of living rises.
And it's set by the Internal Revenue Code, section
Absolutely.
457. Okay, okay, thank you.
Director O'Toole, did you have other comparisons you wanted to make? I have some other questions for you, but I didn't know if you had other things you wanted to present first.
I mean, as long as we're on the topic, just to draw some distinguishing differences between SDRS and the other alternative, the contribution for the employee is obviously 6% under SDRS, and the alternative proposal that the board recommended would be 5%. SDRS is fixed at 6%. Obviously, under the existing DB plan with the City of Sioux Falls, that would be a variable rate based on annual actuarial valuation. And again, in the employees' retirement system, for example, it's 18.39% employer contribution rate for 2012. And in police, it is 29.67% employer rate, and in fire, it's 34.86%. And then the fixed rate on the public safety side is 8% in SDRS. So I think that's important to know. Both SDRS and the alternate plan would not include lump sum payouts, as you heard Mr. Wiley reference earlier. Both have COLA considerations. You heard SDRS at 2.1 to 3.1. The City of Sioux Falls tier structure would be up to 3%. It's capped no greater than 3%, which would be based on the CPI. So there are some broad-based comparisons in terms of the two options. And I mainly wanted to kind of move in the direction the council had questions on. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
If there are no other questions from the committee, I have a few for you, Bill. First of all, if it takes legislation, it's been proposed that we consider this to bring on future employees starting January 1, 2013. Obviously, that would be too soon if it takes legislation, right?
Yeah, I think the absolute soonest would be July of 2013, assuming a productive legislative session.
And is there any upfront cost for us to join? No?
No, there is not.
Any comparisons in terms of the performance compared to the city's plan?
When you say performance, are you talking about the investment performance
Yes.
of the respective plans?
Yes.
I'll let Rob talk about that, and maybe Tom Huber or Tracy Turback from the city.
Okay.
All of the South Dakota retirement system assets are managed through the South Dakota Investment Council here in Sioux Falls. And actually, Tom Huber and I were just visiting a few minutes before the program, and we've had very similar returns between the two plans over the years. When you look at the longer-term track record, the numbers are pretty level. And each of us is going to have a good year here, or not such a good year. You'll have a lot of variance from year to year, but I think maybe Tom is actually your one for the actual answer to this. So,
Tom, do you want to address it?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I went back and I looked at our returns, fiscal year, states on a fiscal year, so June 30th to July 1st, and went back and looked at our returns, and over the 10 years, they were at about 7% and we were at about 7.2%, so over a 10-year time span, basically right on top of each other for returns, and both of those returns would rank very, very high, probably in the upper 10% of the country in returns over the long term. So on a year-to-year basis, it fluctuates. Our investment allocations are a little bit different as to what we have in equity and what we have in fixed income, but you know, over the long term, pretty similar.
On the converse of that, Tom, with the state's membership being larger, is it less risky for future city employees to be in that or not?
I don't know if you could, I mean, I'm guessing our investment allocations are fairly similar. And so I don't know that if I could say one way or the other from an investment standpoint, you know, again, our returns kind of model each other, and that drives a lot of the performance in each of the plans. So I don't know that I'd have a really good answer to assess the risk from that angle.
I would just mention that with respect to that risk question, one of the things that's different about SDRS and the current DB plan with the City of Sioux Falls from a risk standpoint is that in the SDRS system, you saw it was fixed contribution rates for the employer and the employee, whereas in the current defined benefit system with the City of Sioux Falls, it is a variable rate, and we're more susceptible, I think, to adjustments based on the investment performance in that regard.
let me add just two small points on that. I shouldn't say small points, but because of the fact that you're Sioux Falls and the way it has worked out, some of our very experienced people from the Investment Council sit on your boards also. And so I think there is naturally a certain amount of similar allocations to it, either people from the council or the investment staff in down on, I believe it is South Louise, have participated with you, and so there's naturally pretty similar look between the two.
Okay. Bill, a couple other questions for you. What if future employees go on South Dakota retirement, what is the cost savings in terms of administering the plan?
The cost savings are obviously significant in both plans, and when the pension boards first analyzed going to the South Dakota retirement system, they engaged its current retained actuary, Gabriel Woodard Smith & Company, and when they did that analysis, they did a 5-year analysis on the cost savings. So what I have from them, and that was done in late 2010, and they just showed us over the next 5 years from 2011 to 2015, they showed approximately a $1.8 million savings by going to the South Dakota retirement system. Now, obviously, this is a long-term deal. They just illustrated it in 5-year increments, and of course, Kavanaugh McDonald illustrated it a little bit differently. And when they did it, they modeled a couple different scenarios where it included healthcare savings and a different component there. But that was over $100 million over 30 years with the analysis with the revised tier structure and the existing DB plan. So it's not necessarily apples to apples in the comparison, but they were done at different times in different actuaries.
Any challenges for you in managing two systems? I mean, you're not managing, obviously, South Dakota retirement, but fielding questions from two different systems, any challenges there?
Yeah, there may be, but I see it more of a coordination issue more than anything else. I don't think it would be anything that would present us with any sort of challenges that we couldn't handle with existing staff that are already there today. So we wouldn't anticipate any.
And then what are you forecasting for how many employees would go on the system if for the sake of discussion, we started in July 2013, forecasting forward, how many employees a year do you anticipate we would add to the South Dakota retirement system?
Based on the numbers that we've seen in both of those reports, it fluctuates, but it's around 50 to 55 probably each year.
Any big bumps coming as a result of a bubble of retirements or anything like that? And I know that's hard to predict.
It's hard. I mean, what I can tell you is that we know that we have, on average, about 30 to 35 people each year becoming eligible for retirement. And we know right now today that there's about 100 folks that are eligible as of today that could retire. So, and those that are becoming eligible also is the same number of those that are retiring. So on average, 30 to 35 per month are becoming eligible to retire, and about 30 to 35 each month are retiring each month. So that's about where we are.
Okay. Councilor Jameson.
Bill, do you feel like the changing over to the South Dakota retirement system would jeopardize the ability for the city to hire good, talented individuals in the future?
I do not. The South Dakota retirement system is obviously very effective for just about every other public sector employee out there. It is a defined benefit pension plan that I think it gets at the heart of retirement security. Now, there are slight differences between what we're considering. Yeah, there's some slight differences, but it's still a very effective, very good plan. It is a defined benefit plan that does accomplish a level of retirement security that we're very comfortable with.
Any other questions?
If I could, I have one.
Go ahead, Councilor Carson.
We talked about the contribution rate at 8% currently. And how often has that changed? Who has the authority to change that? I mean, does that take legislative action? Is that up to your board? How often has it historically? Give me a perspective.
The 8% has pretty much held since 1974. We have approached the employer contribution as a fixed item. It is fixed in law. South Dakota codified law provides for those, both the contribution rates for A and B, and there has been a recent, is in 2002, a change from 5% to 6% in the Class A, the general employees, but that was more of an issue, less about funding and more about balancing benefits. So effectively, the commitments made by the Board of Trustees of the retirement system have been that the employer rates are fixed, even to the point that in 2010, when we had to take corrective action when the market values were hurt so bad, actually it was in 2009's fiscal year, but the 2010 legislature, that we took corrective action and actually diminished the benefits as opposed to asking employers to contribute more. It is, it's something that's we're working through, but it's remained very stable throughout the 35-year history.
If I could just clarify one statement that I made earlier, my staff pointed out that my statistics and my numbers were a little high on the 30 to 35 per month. That was an annual number, not a per month number. So I apologize for that. Got a lot of numbers on my sheet here. So, and one last thing too that I just wanted to mention that we're still working through as it relates to this issue. There is an issue that we're trying to resolve and get the answer to on a Social Security question. I think this council may remember that our current employees, our public safety employees, do not participate in Social Security. And there are some issues in the South Dakota retirement system, and I think it has to do with the disability benefits and the survivor benefits, where all the other folks are in Social Security. So we are looking at one issue that we just recently discovered that we want to do. We want to report back as it relates to whether or not that's something we need to address or not, but a difference nonetheless that we wanted to point out.
Bill, if we do move forward with this plan, what's the life expectancy, if you will, of the city's retirement plan? How long you'd have to manage that before all the retirees are through
It'll be some time. I mean, it'll be at least 30 years or longer until the last person passes away. So it'll be some time before we're completely out of the pension system. But obviously, we know that the liabilities are closed down and would have some planning to account for that, but it would still be some time.
Councilor Aguilar.
Looking at that, would our pension system then be able to be sustained without any new blood coming into it?
Yes, I mean, that was factored in terms of some of the analysis. There was a recognition that, yes, as you progress out and you close down the plan, that those future revenues are not coming in, but your liabilities are also ending, and you have an end date in mind. So, and I think in some of the reports you saw an initial uptick in some contribution rates as a result of that, but longer term, there was tremendous savings over the longer term, but that has been recognized, and that is the truth, that, yeah, that revenue is now going to South Dakota retirement system, if that's the direction we move.
Any other questions? Thank you, Bill. Mr. Wiley, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. As a household, my wife is a teacher. As a household that depends in part on what you do in your work, I appreciate.
I'll try and keep up with her.
Thank you. Next up, item B, discussion on how to spend the remaining CIP budget funds. First, I'm going to ask for a report from Councilor Jamison and Councilor Karski, who worked with city staff in developing a plan for long-term policy regarding budget surplus in the CIP. So, Councilor Jamison.
All right, thank you, Rich Oaksall, Dave Bixler, Dean Karski, and I just met before this meeting and reviewed some of the items. A couple of clarifications I wanted to start off with. The other night I had mentioned that there was an ordinance that was eliminated by an executive order. I think to be crystal clear, what had happened is there was an executive order that established a capital improvement program committee. And then it was referred to in an ordinance, I think it's 13-04, that committee was referred to. And then later on, with an executive order, the committee was then disbanded. But we still have it in our ordinance of 1304. In fact, if you go to your charter or your capital book, on one of the first pages, it references that the Capital Improvements Program Committee. Now, I don't know who's on that committee, and perhaps there is a committee that is comprised of a couple of people. But in the initial executive order that was created, they outlined a structure to that review committee. And what we've kind of been going through is this whole process about, first started off with the $4 million and how we would spend it, but it's also turned into how do we prevent this problem from occurring every year. And through that process, we learned that this review committee is no longer, program committee is no longer in existence, really, from what we can understand, and that we think that if we implemented that program back in the structure, we could have then, and if you follow 1304, the ordinance, it'll outline what projects should be funded in the sequence, in the next order. So we wouldn't have to come together like we're going to do here in a couple minutes and try to figure out where to spend that $4 million. We would automatically just go down the list. And it would simplify the process, I think. But to get there, we need to probably evaluate whether or not we want to implement that committee again. From the message we had gotten was that you do, that we do. And I think we referred to that in the last or a couple of informational meetings ago, and that we got kind of a consensus that the committee was, review committee was something we wanted to proceed with. You know, Rich and David have that executive order that outlines that committee structure. So if we could, I think it'd be appropriate if we just looked at that executive order real quick that outlines the structure. And at the end of the day, what we'd like to probably get done is to see if this committee wants to forward it on to the full council and get their support by including this structure of the review committee that they'll show here into Ordinance 1304, which outlines how the budget is presented to us. Here's 1304, or here's the executive order. You could review this, but there's appointed members, and there are, I believe, 7 total. But if we'd like to re-implement this process, we really need to take this language. It's a pretty good, solid program. The way it was, this executive order was written back when it was established. I think we just need to transfer this into the ordinance, so then it's continued to be followed. Any other comments, Karski?
I guess what I'd like to add to this whole process is the Capital Improvements Programs Committee, or Capital Improvements Programs Committee, it dates back, I think we found reference to it all the way back to '96, and the first executive order, the one that we could find, goes back to '99, and there have been 6 of them or 5 of them since '99, addressing who is on this committee, who it's comprised of, and it's varied between 6 and 7 members. And when it was eliminated in January of '99, it was kind of right at the beginning of our leaner economic times. I'm sorry, in 2009. It's kind of at the beginning of the economic downturn, and more of a situation of we didn't have the surplus funds that we have now, and now for the last 2 years we've been dealing with surplus funds and how to appropriately use those in our budget process and to have as much input as we can so that the decision process is a little bit broader and more wider scale, I guess. So that's where kind of a history where we're at. It's going to be up to us now to decide, do we want to take it to the full council to have such a committee addressed in the ordinance. And the ordinance we're talking about is 13-04, where the Capital Improvements Programs Committee is referenced at least twice.
Right, so to move this along, I think the idea would be to, certainly answer any questions of all of us, but if there's a wish, we would like to include this language from the executive order and install that into the new revision of 1304, and then bring it back to the council.
I have a question. I see Mike Cooper in the audience. Mike, you've probably seen it operate both ways. Could you give us any perspective historically on how it worked with some citizen involvement and how the process has worked today?
Sure. Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. Historically, when the CIP was first, that process was first initiated, it goes back to when we had the City Commission. And of course, at that time, the commissioners were full-time. And so they would spend a significant amount of time reviewing the staff requests for projects as well as the projected revenues. When we went to a council form of government and more part-time, that's where the idea floated of having a committee of city staff, but also outside representatives of the Planning Commission, because the capital program is looking out into the future more than 1 year. And then in terms of economic development, having participation by a chamber or development foundation representative. So that's kind of historically how that initial committee idea was formulated. And then I think as we went on, we obviously ran into years where there was significantly more projects being requested than we had funding, as opposed to having excess money at the end of the year that we didn't know what to do with. And I think at the end we kind of struggled of really deciding what should the priorities be, because you have passionate need for park projects, you have need for more street improvements, and so in some cases even us as staff were not always able to kind of reach agreement. And then the outside folks, the two outside people, really sat there and said, you know, this is all way over our head because you guys as city staff have so much more inside information about what the needs are. It's really difficult for us to weigh in and voice our opinion about the priorities. So I think that's kind of what ultimately led to, is the committee structure really working like it was originally intended, because we were having difficulties in some cases kind of sorting out what the priorities were. But it was a decision by the administration at that time to do the executive order to change the focus. So that's a kind of an overview, and I politely dodged the question of which way works the best because, you know, I think, again, city staff, you know, we have a lot of good background information about what the needs are. Finance is always going to be very good about projecting what those revenues are. And then it comes down to the mayor, the council really weighing in on what those final priorities should be. So that's a long-winded answer to your...
That helps. Thanks, Mike, for stepping up on that. Mark Cotter, I don't know if did you have perspective under both? Did you have any additional comments? Okay. Go ahead.
If I could add, I think the benefit to the council would be that we would have extra eyes looking on the whole capital improvement plan, and you know, we take the information that we're giving and we try to do the best we can with it and give it our thought. But I think if we could include others from different perspectives in the process and to have it just like the planning commission does for us. They do a lot of work for us, and if we could get others involved in the community that would want to help us in this process, and I think there are a lot of people who would like to be a part of this, I think the council would be served better and the city would be served better, and that we would get better perspective about the priorities of the city. So it may be frustrating at times and a test of patience, but at the end of the day, I think it'd all be good.
Councilor Aguilar.
I would agree. As a candidate back in 2010, I was asked about this committee, and so I started doing some research. And there were council members then that I spoke with that were not aware that it had been eliminated. So I would agree with the work that our esteemed counselors put into this, and I would also like to see this put into the ordinance.
Okay. So we want to move this on to the full council then and bring back a revised 1304, better defining what we had, kind of a mix between executive order and ordinance. Is that the marching orders?
Right. I think the answer is to put it into ordinance so that we have the teeth necessary and to outline it, define it, and we can get that redone with the help and back to the full council for review. And I think the time is of the essence because we're on the process already. And even if we don't get the full force of the committee in force, parts of it would still be better than what we've got today.
Okay. Councilor Rolfing.
Thank you, Rex Rolfing, Councilor. I want to caution us, as I did the first time we were talking about this, and that is that we don't, as a council, handcuff ourselves too much. And while I like the idea of reforming this committee, I think that's a good idea. I think there are always areas that come up that we as counselors have responsibilities for that we can't pass off. And so when we form this committee, I would caution us to not give them ultimate authority. This is still our responsibility to make those decisions, and that when they come back with suggestions, not the ultimate not the decision, but they come back with suggestions, and that we as a council can always either accept or reject those suggestions and go with our own ideas if we need to. I would just caution us that we make sure that that's the way the
if we're going to bring it into the ordinance, that's the way it be. Okay?
Very good. Any questions or comments? Councilor Karski.
In a reply to your comments, Councilor Rolfing, I guess the way I envision this committee is as more of a vetting process for the entire CIP budget, and to get more input into the process from public and our city employees, so that when we get to a point where we want to know what projects are shovel ready, we're relying on a committee that brings it to us instead of, I guess, sitting and wondering whose best interest or what project are we doing this on based on whose input. And having this process, I think, would be a good vetting process to make that happen, to make that work.
So, Councilor Jamison, who best from key staff needs to be working on this ordinance to bring it to the full council?
Well, I think in the absence of our legislative operations director coming on board yet, I think we could have Rich Oaksel and Dave Bixler capture those words and give it to us. I think we can get that done. We can work with the city attorney's office to make sure it's in the proper format.
Okay.
I think that would work.
Okay. With the intent of going straight to the full council, or do you want to bring a draft back to this committee next month?
Well, we've got nearly all the council is here in the room, and if there is, I think the intention would be that Councilor Karski and myself would make sure we reach out to all the other councilors and get this draft to them and review it with them directly, so that we could get feedback and get it on the agenda for the full council to vote on sooner than later. So we would expedite it through a kind of another channel, but we would work directly with those who are not here. Is that okay?
Very good. Does that sound all right? All right. That is what you'll do moving forward. And then let's deal with also the issue at hand. If Finance Director Tracy Turback could address, you had sent us an email, but let's walk through some of those projects. First of all, you sent us an email outlining some of those things. I think the intent was to get a number of options. Am I correct in that assumption? But let's walk through this list that you sent us first, and then we can talk about that.
Okay, thank you. Tracy Turback with Finance Office. I did send out a message to the council members yesterday offering 3 additional alternatives to be considered as potential uses for the $4 million remaining from 2011's capital program. I don't know how much detail you'd like me to go into. You want me just to recap the 3?
Yes, would you please? Just for the benefit of the audience as well.
Okay. The 3 alternatives that were identified, and I'll refer to them as A, B, and C. A and B both relate to public works projects and specifically the street system. Street projects under the A alternative include really 2 parts, and there is an additional memo attached to the email provided by Public Works Director Mark Cotter that kind of explained more of the background and details related to these. But the option A really deals with 2 pieces. One is providing $300,000 in additional funding for a project that's in the plan this year, in 2012's plan, that appears that it may not have adequate funding to complete. That would be the 14th Street improvements between Minnesota and Phillips Avenues. The balance of the $4 million or $3.7 million would, under this option, would go into the arterial street improvement program for improvements in the Cliff Avenue corridor and to the intersection at Cliff Avenue and 69th Street. And I'm sure you'll have more questions on these maybe when I finish, but I know Mark Cotter is here, as is Don Kearney, relative to the park projects. The second option, option B, again, are also street projects. There was a list included in Mark's memo attached of, I believe there were 8 different projects included there. that tallied up to $4 million. So that's would be an additional option. Included in that list is or I should say that list also includes the 14th Street improvements between Minnesota and Phillips Avenue. So essentially they wanted to present you with alternatives that covered that project if you were to choose between one of those two in either event. That project is clearly a high priority for the Public Works Department to complete this year. And I'll leave it to you folks or to Mark, I guess, to go through the 8 separate projects if you choose to today. The third option, option C, would not involve spending the money this year. It would really involve setting the money aside or earmarking the funds for future quality of life projects. Oftentimes, I think the city has experienced kind of some very difficult challenges trying to fund some of the quality of life projects within the year-to-year funding available within the capital improvement plan. So this would be an alternative where, should the council choose to set the money aside for those projects, for whichever projects the council might decide to pursue in the future. There were a couple that were identified by the Parks Department. An aquatics facility at Spellerberg Park was one, and second possible project under the heading of quality of life would be the Levitt Pavilion, potentially constructed in Falls Park West. That site is being evaluated. So that's kind of a recap of the 3 alternatives that were offered up in the email, and I would certainly try to answer any questions. And again, Mark Cotter and Don Kearney are here as well.
Other questions for Tracy? Questions for any of the other directors? Councilor Karski.
Mr. Cotter, if you don't mind, the Cliff Avenue project, how much of that's engineered? How far are we into that?
By chance, do you have the intersection or the memo? I'll put.
Yeah, I got that.
I would expect a project of that size will be somewhere between 400 to 500,000 on the high side to do all the final design activities. But one of the things that we do have that we don't have on many corridors is that we have sat down as we've been studying this entire corridor from 229 South to 85th Street. The first phase of those improvements gets built in 2012 at 57th Street and Cliff Avenue, and they'll extend north to about 54th Street and south to about Libby Lane to the south. We do have the line work, and so I would say we already have preliminary design done, and so I can certainly come back to you and give you a more exact number if we did scope this project, but on the high side it would be 500,000.
Okay, as a percentage complete for engineering completed, are we at 10%, 50%?
Typically, if we do the line work like this, we're probably at 15% of the engineering work is established.
50, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Well, it's a little bit awkward because I won't be here. How do you guys want to proceed? Do you want to proceed with these options? Are you looking for other options? Councilor Aguilar.
I would suggest that we have a full council work session on this, as we did last year, and invite the streets, the public works, and the parks. And I know that there are other councilors that have some things that they want us to look at, and I think that that would expedite the process in the end.
Is there anything you want from directors in the meantime to help expedite that?
I would turn to my colleagues. I don't know if there's anything else at this time.
Go ahead. If I could, the process that we went through last year took quite amount of effort to get to that point where we had that list, a shopping list, so to speak, from all those directors. And I think what I've heard from others is that that process after we had that list went very well. We negotiated amongst ourselves. We talked about the priorities that we had for the city and what should be addressed, and we agreed. And we voted on that, and we passed it. The challenge that we have today is that we still need that list. And we've asked for it. And it's been a difficult challenge every year, and I get it. I guess there's a lot of excitement about these projects, and ownership of them is a big deal. So in order to get to that next level, we'll still need that list. So I last year carried a heavy burden, honestly, getting that list done. I thought I put a lot of pressure on some directors, and they were under a lot of pressure to give that list. So I would really like to have somebody else carry that ball this year. And if we have somebody willing to do that, that would help me. If not, then I guess I will. But so it's going to take a little more work to get to that work session. Just so you know, I did go through a lot of work to get there, and we just need to do it still.
Councilor Aguilar.
But don't we have some of the basis right now from the email that we received with the projects that are being suggested? I think that we probably do need more of a dollar value put on some of those. And I think that one of the street projects is shovel-ready, from what I understood. I see Councilor Erpenbach at the podium.
If I might, Mr. Chair, Michelle Erpenbach, City Council, I just was going to point out exactly what Councilor Aguilar was just saying, is that that email is pretty specific about how much each one of those items will cost, and that they add up to $4 million. And then I think that, as Councilor Aguilar said, there are other projects that some of us want to look at, in addition to making sure this building gets completed this year in terms of the repair and maintenance issues that have to go on here. So I do think we have to have that work session where we kind of, put all the cards on the table and switch them back and forth until it adds up to $4 million. But I think the directors have done what we've asked them to do in terms of coming up with a pretty specific list. And that we just need to move forward from there. Then my question would be to Council Chair Aguilar, if we want to set that work session now so that this can move forward, because our timeline is rather short, I would imagine.
Well,
go ahead.
Since I'm a short timer as chair also, I would probably see this not happening until after the council is sworn in, and so if there's a date that Councilor Erpenbach has in mind, I would.
Well, I don't want to speak for the council either, if I might, Mr. Chair. I don't want to speak for the council either, but those Wednesday evenings have worked really well for us. It may be a good idea if the clerks could check the calendar and just see maybe that first Wednesday in June, perhaps June 6th would be workable, so that we are also, all the new councilors are sworn in, and we're moving ahead with new leadership at that point. All
right, let's have a tentative date of June 6th as the work session to deal with that, and it could be subject to change. And is there anything else on this issue in the meantime?
I just want to be clear, if I could, that if the council is, if we've received all the information we would want, we need to make sure that they know that. We don't want any more options available to us, that we've received all the ones that we'll consider. Is that what we're saying?
Well, what I'm hearing Councilor Erpenbach saying is, I'm a little confused, because you said we have the complete list, but then you are mentioning specific projects that aren't in the list. So,
if I might, Mr. Chair, the directors have done what you asked through Mr. Turbeck, in terms of they've put it into 3 categories. They've put numbers on specific projects. There are street projects that add up to, there's several options of smaller projects. There's the larger option if you want to do 3.7 to 69th and Cliff, plus the other to finish the 14th Street project this year. Those kinds of things are all laid out very clearly in that email. There are other, my concern is that there are other issues that specific council members want to bring to the table in terms of adding into that mix. That we don't necessarily want to take as Tracy said, A, B, or C. We want to take part of A, a little bit of C, and then something from over here and put that together to make 4 million as the process I thought we were headed toward.
So for those projects that aren't included, just for example, you mentioned this building, the Carnegie, that needs some other items mentioned. Can we funnel, if any of the counselors have other items that are not in the list in the email that it sent out, that those get funneled to leadership, and leadership will communicate with finance to bring those numbers before the work session? Does that work for everyone? If there are other projects that you don't see on the list, you send it to leadership. Leadership will communicate that to finance, and finance will bring those numbers forth before the work session.
Mr. Chair, on June 6th, there is a 4 o'clock CCOG meeting, which will affect some of us.
Pick the next Wednesday then, if I might, Mr. Chair.
13th.
The 13th of June.
And I see nothing on the calendar at this point.
Okay.
Can I ask, why not sooner instead of later? Why, I mean, we are doing our council elections and everything on May 21st. Why not the 23rd?
The 30th?
23rd.
30th?
May 30th would be a possibility.
How about the 23rd? Can we get it together that quickly?
There is no council meeting that week.
We have done them before during the week when we weren't, which actually works pretty well for people.
If I might, Mr. Chair, that special meeting is that Monday, the 21st.
Monday, and the Minnehaha County
your
joint.
special meeting?
No, we meet with the county at 5:30 that day, don't we?
5:30. We could have a work session following, get it all done in one night on the 21st.
Time is of the essence, so. Okay, 21st.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on that issue? I believe we have one item for other business. David, were you going to address us on any issue in other? Regarding reports from those that manage city-owned facilities?
Correct. We were going to talk about myself possibly drafting a letter and having the fiscal committee endorse it, and that way I could standardize reporting with the different entities so that it would make it easier to go through their updates going forward.
So you're talking about organizations like the zoo and the pavilion and Great Bear and the golf, any of those organizations that manage city-owned facilities having sort of a standard reporting mechanism or form so the council can compare apples to apples amongst all the organizations, correct?
Yes, and this would be in addition to what they're already providing. It's not something that say this is what you're going to do going forward, just something that is standardized, so every time that you look at a report from these groups, you'll see a similar format.
Any questions for David on that? Thoughts?
If I could add just a thought, I think it's a great idea because we struggle sometimes to determine whether or not somebody's doing a good job. They may give us a great presentation about what's happening, but it's hard for us sometimes to evaluate each of them. So I think this will give us a standardized procedure, along with David's help, to really digest what they're saying and whether or not, our investment, either with an operating expense or a capital plan, something, our investment is getting returned, and not, they don't just present financials to us that we can't judge whether or not it's a good or bad program. So I think it's a great idea.
Other questions or comments? Is everyone okay with David moving forward on that?
Yeah.
I would just add that all the metrics are not always financially based. It's going to be, there's other things that they provide and things that they use to measure their performance. And I'd like to bring those and make sure that they come up into the forefront.
Really is a performance measurement, right? Well, if you want to draft that and present it to the committee next month and move it forward, that'd be great.
All right, thank you.
Any other items under other?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This being the chair's last meeting as chair of the fiscal committee, I'd like to thank him for his service. And say that we will miss you, and thank you for your 8 years of service on City Council.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a fun committee to be on. Thank you. Stop. You're embarrassing me. Thank you. I appreciate that. We are adjourned.